All right, guys, what's going on? It's Josh Answers here, and we're gonna have a fun informational video here today about Bitcoin. It's going to be a 30 quiz or 30 question quiz about some of the basics of just how Bitcoin works. So, why I wanted to do this is because if you could get a passing grade, if you don't get a passing grade, I don't think you should invest and you should really reconsider what you know about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, even though this is just Bitcoin, but use this as an opportunity to say, hey, I don't know a lot, and go study and research more so you could really understand the complexity behind this stuff. And also, it could even just teach you guys a lot about how it works and some of the factors that are taking place in all the moving parts of Bitcoin. So I think it's really fun. We're going to go over this. We're going to go over the answers. Some of them are easy, some of them are difficult, but let's begin. Question number one: how many Bitcoins can ever exist? So, this is the total supply. You guys have probably heard this. This one should be an easy one. The answer to that is simply 21 million. And that, as we have the explanation below, it's a hard coded cap. It is never going to ever go beyond that. The last Bitcoin is expected to be mined around 2141. So, I think though that we're gonna reach that. I don't know. I think there's a little bit more info on that. I don't know if that's actually fully correct, but I know most of them will be in circulation here pretty shortly. So number two question is, what is a Bitcoin wallet? Now, I'm sure some of you guys, this one's pretty easy. Some of you know what it is. And if you don't know, this is what you will need to begin trading. So you might want to pay attention to this answer. Your options are: it's a flash drive with the special key on it, a software that could receive and send Bitcoin transactions and store your private key, a Bitcoin address, or a database of all transactions made to your address. Now, this one should be easy simply for all of you guys. It is a software that can receive and send Bitcoin transactions and store private keys. So it's specialized software, sometimes even hardware, which means, they have even hard drives made for this that allows you to send your Bitcoin there, send them, and it does the signing and it manages the keys and all that, which I'm sure is going to come up throughout here. So that is what a Bitcoin wallet is. Number three, who invented Bitcoin? A. Josh answers. I mean, a group of researchers from MIT, the CIA, an anonymous person who took the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto, or PayPal founders, aka Elon Musk. Even though people don't like Bitcoin, you would think it was an Elon Musk product. This one, if you guys have ever heard of it, is Satoshi Nakamoto. And this was a so-called quote unquote white paper, was published in '08. This was the first time they released the code of Bitcoin and everything, but this was kind of that, you know, summary of investment of what Bitcoin was, how it worked, how the blockchain was. And even as it says here, other non anonymous developers soon started working and collaborating on the project. Those are known as your core Bitcoin developers. But the inventor of Bitcoin is anonymous. No one knows who it is. There's speculations. They think it's this guy in Australia. People say he's been caught. People don't know, but he is probably one of the richest men in the world, and he's just GOAT. Uh, very smart guy. Oh shit, I didn't mean to do that. Well, there's your answer. This one's pretty easy. How is the price of Bitcoin determined? And you have all your different answers here. It's not tied to the USD. It's not tied to it's not tied to the USD. It's not determined by the developers of Bitcoin, and it's not determined by demand of transactions at the moment. It's through supply and demand across multiple Bitcoin exchanges. So we'll get into those exchanges actually comes up here. So you kind of have to know what that is to answer this question. But it's saying it's set across multiple Bitcoin exchanges. It may differ from exchange to exchange, country to country. Some exchange may have a significantly higher or lower price depending on how hard or easy it is to buy or sell Bitcoin in that particular jurisdiction and in using the particular payment method. So it is supply and demand, though, and that is across pretty much the global world, almost as most commodities are. So next, we got, what is a Bitcoin address? You guys have probably heard this. This is very important to know. Is it a unique identifier of a Bitcoin user in the system? I think I'm just going to stop reading the questions. I'll give you guys some time to read it. But think about where you've heard this, what it is. If you are in Bitcoin, you know this is easy. Simply, it's a string of Latin letters and numbers, which is used to receive funds in your Bitcoin wallet. So a typical Bitcoin address looks like this. don't know the exact amount of characters, it looks very, very confusing and like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. If you guys are ever sending or receiving Bitcoin, always double check, make sure there's no spaces, because if you fuck this up, you could fuck up your transaction and lose your money and send it somewhere. A typical Bitcoin wallet could generate as many of these as you wish, and they will all belong to the same wallet, and it's customary to use a new address for each new incoming transaction. What is a private key? So this is probably interesting as well. Some of you may have heard this and not know what it is, but simply a string of letters and numbers which is used to sign transactions that spend Bitcoins in your wallet. So a private key is needed to spend Bitcoin stored on a particular address generated by the wallet. Losing your private key will result in your inability to spend or send your money, which is Bitcoin's equivalent to losing the Bitcoin. So if you lose your private key, you're essentially screwed. There is methods, you could write down your key. You could get a quote unquote paper wallet, which I recommend. Have everything in writing, put it in a safe deposit box, and make sure you don't lose that stuff. If that's not going to be technically your private key, we're going to answer what that is. Therefore, it's recommended to back it up. Normally, if it's on a file in your file system, it is not the wallet yourself. So that is one thing. And be careful too where you store your private key. If you store your private key on a computer and anywhere and it's hidden on your computer somewhere and you get hacked or phished, if they get that file, if you emailed it to yourself, you're essentially screwed. So be very, very careful with that. Next, what is a seed? And now this is what we actually just brought up. It is a sequence of words from which private key can be regenerated. A seed is like a convenient backup of your wallet's private key. Most wallets upon their first launch will ask you to write down a sequence of English words, typically from 12 to 24, which then can be used to generate the private key if your computer is wiped out and all files are lost. You can write them down on a piece of paper, download the wallet onto a new computer, and enter the seed and get access to your Bitcoin. So it is different than the private key. I kind of messed up there earlier, but hopefully you guys understand kind of what's being said with that. But if you do lose your private key, there is a way to get it, and that is the seed. So make sure you keep this safe and in a place where you're not going to lose it, can be damaged by water. Put it in a safe, get another copy, hide it somewhere, and don't let people know where it is, or you might get kidnapped. That's a real story. What is a Bitcoin exchange? So I think this one's pretty easy if you guys are following this channel. A website or software that allows to buy or sell Bitcoin. So I don't even think that needs an explanation, but this is where the exchanges are facilitating and allowing you to put your money in, deposit your cryptos, your cash, withdraw to your bank, buy and sell. What is a Bitcoin transaction? So this one could be a little bit confusing if you guys don't really know how to put it into words. It's not transferring money in your bank. Actually, pretty much, very simply, it's a message later written onto the Bitcoin blockchain that specifies the amount being sent from a certain address to another. So a transaction is a special a message broadcasted to the Bitcoin network stating that a certain number of Bitcoin is sent from one address to another or multiple different addresses to some other address. The message includes a signature that verifies whoever sent the transaction is the owner of the private key and thus the owner of the Bitcoins being stored on the address from which they're being sent. And, that's how Bitcoin essentially operates. It writes down all of this publicly. That's what all the computers and mining is for, which we're going to get into. And that is how Bitcoin is. It's a public ledger, essentially. And that's why it's better than banks and more efficient at that and safer. Next, what is a Bitcoin block? So as you guys see, the questions are getting a little bit more difficult here. Simply, it's a bunch of cryptographically verified transactions bundled together and written on the blockchain. So that's where you guys will hear people saying newly mined blocks or write it to the Bitcoin block, et cetera, et cetera. Miners spend computing power and electricity to find the next block, which they are then free to fill with any transactions currently pending in the so-called mempool. When a transaction is included into the block, it's considered confirmed. Thus, a block is just a bunch of different confirmed transactions bundled together and written onto the blockchain. So these computers that's what mining is. They find these blocks. Then once they find it, they start confirming transactions. So it's, again, millions of computers all around the world storing this data, keeping it there, and doing, it's never just on one central server, which makes Bitcoin so powerful and safe at that. When is a Bitcoin transaction confirmed? So it doesn't have anything to do with time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter when it gets on the block. It is after it's included to the block, as a transaction is said to have one confirmation when it's including onto the block. Then after each new block is mined, a transaction gets an additional confirmation. So it gets verified many times over, which is another question on here. But essentially, right when it gets included to the block, it's on that public ledger for everybody to see. Your Bitcoin transaction has been confirmed, and most transactions go through multiple confirmations. How many confirmations is considered for a safe for Bitcoin transaction? 1, 3, 6, or 7? The lucky number 6, not 7. Most wallets consider 6 to be the number of safe confirmations, which is impossible to reverse the transaction. Generally speaking, it's very hard and it's expensive to reverse a transaction even after just one confirmation. Some exchanges and services may require 3 confirmations and consider it safe. This is a very subjective question. It all depends on the brokerage and the confirmation. This is saying on average, or what do most wallets consider. The more confirmations, the better, but you also have to think about time and all that. I think Binance does a lot more than 6 confirmations. Next, what is a Bitcoin transaction fee? So, yes, there is fees with Bitcoin, but it's a lot cheaper than your $25 wire transfer fee at a bank. It is the amount of BTC user pays to the miners to include the transaction into the block. Users can set transaction fee voluntary, and miners are free to accept it or not. The higher the transaction fee, the more likelihood there is that the miner will include it into the next block. Low fee transaction risk to never be included into a block and thus never be confirmed. So again, you can set what you want to pay, but then you have to think about, basic self-interest. But again, there is fees, and this is also the incentive why these people are running their computers all day to get a piece of the action. What is a Bitcoin blockchain? So again, this is now the blockchain, the crazy technology everybody has talked about. A sequence of blocks with all the data confirmed transactions in it and distributed and stored by each full node on the system. A block, as mentioned before, is a bunch of cryptographically verified transactions bundled together. A blockchain then is a distributed ledger of all those transactions stored as a sequence of blocks. This ledger is copied and stored across many different so-called full nodes on a system. A full node is a wallet that stores the whole blockchain, and that is a lot of data. So think about that. And that was going back to what we were saying with how this is why the blockchain is so powerful and so amazing. It's almost impenetrable. And data can't just be wiped out once. It's stored all over the place, copied in public. And if anything ever happened, it's easy to track and look through the blocks in the blockchain itself. Next, what purpose do miners serve? We kind of already got there. They cryptographically verify all the transactions. So these are the guys who are going and doing all this work. Miners cryptographically verify transactions by spending computer power and electricity. As a reward, they get newly mined bitcoins and also transaction fees by the users. Miners' purpose isn't to create new bitcoins. It's actually just a temporary side effect. Sometimes in the future, when Bitcoin reaches its 21 million cap, miners will stop receiving new Bitcoins as a reward and will only rely on a transaction fee to make money. So that's something I think a lot of people don't understand, because people say, oh, well, why aren't miners doing this? Or if the price goes too low, miners will stop. Although that will have an effect, yes, not all the time miners are getting coins. They don't always find the coins and mine them as a purpose of getting these blocks. It's very difficult. And again, there's that set supply. But what can happen is what they will be doing, especially as the price goes up. Imagine Bitcoin at 50,000 a coin. Those people are going to start getting transaction fees, which could be a decent amount. Again, operate as a bank just by having a bunch of computers. So, how fast is each new blockchain found? So, I think this is a good question. What do you guys think? Obviously, you're going to have time here to think about it. On average, though, it is about 10 minutes. A new blockchain is found on average every 10 minutes. It depends on different factors, but cannot be predicted exactly. Sometimes a new block may not appear for more than an hour. Then new blocks are found every 2 minutes. It all really varies, but on average, it's about 10 minutes. And again, this stuff is changing and very subjective at that too. What is proof of work? So this one, you guys have probably heard this. It's kind of a good concept. And again, this is the stuff you guys need to understand. And especially if you ever want to read ICOs and understand what they're saying, it is a piece of data confirming that energy was spent mining a block and verifying the transaction in it. A proof of work is a piece of data which is difficult, costly, time consuming to produce, but easy for others to verify, which satisfies certain requirements. In Bitcoin, proof of work is used to verify that miners actually wasted energy and computing power producing a new block, thus ensuring no one could cheat and mine a block for free, which is again why it's been so difficult to hack. And again, it's very, very transparent. This is the transparency that Bitcoin provides. Next, what is a block reward? So this is now different than the other ones, but essentially a sum of all transaction fees for transaction, including the block, newly generated bitcoins, da 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 da. Again, I always get tempted to read these questions for you. You guys could read them as we go over the explanation. But a block reward is newly generated bitcoins that go to the miner who rewarded the block. So in this case, a block reward is the number of bitcoins awarded to the miner who found a block. And every 4 years, the reward shrinks. That's the Bitcoin halving. Initially, the block reward was set to 50 bitcoins, coming down to 25 BTC 4 years later and 12.5 BTC 4 years later. So that's where that whole first question, the last Bitcoin will be mined around that time of 22,100, whatever. What is cold storage? Now, this is very important, and make sure you guys really understand this. And you will probably need this, especially if you have a lot. I recommend it regardless. It is a Bitcoin wallet or machine, or a Bitcoin wallet on a machine or a device that's never been connected to the internet. Cold storage is a Bitcoin wallet that lives on a machine that has never been connected to the internet. This is considered very safe, as any outside connection may result in the machine becoming vulnerable, and thus the possibility of private keys being exposed and funds stolen. Regular users are less likely to use cold storage, as it requires discipline to arrange the correct workflow, while Bitcoin exchanges deploy this technique to protect their users' funds. So that's what a lot of funds, and there's safes underground that do it. But if you have a lot and you're just trying to hold it, you might want to consider cold storage. It is, like they said, it's very difficult to actually do, and it's very, very consuming time, and it needs a lot of discipline to actually execute it properly. What is a hardware wallet? Now, you guys have heard this, and be careful of hardware wallets that you buy online. Make sure it's reputable. Make sure it's coming from the seller, because I have heard of scams of people buying wallets and just getting screwed with it being pretty much hacked from the get-go. But a hardware wallet is a single purpose device that serves as a Bitcoin wallet. A hardware wallet is typically a small device the size of a flash drive that can be connected to your computer. The device acts as a Bitcoin wallet and nothing else, thus eliminating many angles of attack as a typical as oh my gosh, many angles of attack a typical computer has. It's considered safer way to store bitcoins, but ultimately the safest way is cold storage. How many bitcoins is one satoshi? Now, you guys have probably heard this a lot of times, and this is the metric. You guys see this in the stock market. You'll see these everywhere. A satoshi is one of these. One's 10 hundredths. So I don't even know if it goes to the millionth, but each bitcoin is divisible, and the smallest denomination is one satoshi, which has 8 digits after the decimal point, 7 zeros and a 1. You can buy and sell or send fractions of one bitcoin. This is why Bitcoin is so powerful, and how you could send it in super, super small blocks. What is change in Bitcoin transaction? This is actually a very good question. I think this one's probably very difficult. Any ideas? Bitcoin sent to the sender's wallet address in the same transaction. The transactions in Bitcoin are composed in such a way that only the full amount is so-called import and can be sent when creating another transaction. For example, if I have an address A to which I received half a Bitcoin, one input of BTC, and now I want to send 2.5 BTC to my friend, the new transaction will contain two outputs, one with my friend's address and another with the change address from my wallet. Both addresses B and C will receive 25 Bitcoin, or quarter of a Bitcoin, and so the change I will receive will equal 25 of a quarter of a Bitcoin. So kind of like change in basic function, but again, this is stuff you will need to understand how it works. Again, if you're just trading you might never encounter this, but if you do start getting in the process of transferring money, sending it, who you're sending it to, this stuff is important to know. What is a Bitcoin full node? So this is pretty confusing. Again, they're getting pretty hard now, but it's a wallet that stores the whole blockchain on the machine it is in self-installed on. A full node in a Bitcoin node or wallet that stores the whole blockchain on the same machine and is thus able to fully validate all incoming transactions by itself. Running a full node is considered the safest way to use Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin blockchain is very large and takes gigabytes of space on the hard drive, making it less interesting for regular users to run a full node. I know people who have nodes and they sell them and rent them out. Shout out Mr. Allison. And it's you could make money even being a part of this node economy is what we'll call it. Next, what is a test net? So this one's kind of self-explanatory, but it's a parallel Bitcoin network created for testing purposes. So Bitcoin testnet is a network created by the developers for testing purposes. Anyone can use it. It's easy and free to obtain the testnet Bitcoins as they're worth nothing. And you could test your software on the testnet network without risking real Bitcoin. So great way to start testing your coins, how things would work, and even play around. But again, get some experience. Make sure you don't confuse the testnet with your real coins. What is difficulty in Bitcoin? So this is something, again, it's pretty self-explanatory, but you got to understand what it means. It controls how hard it is to mine a new block. Every 2016, the difficulty is adjusted by the network as a whole. This is done to make sure that even if someone starts using very powerful computer, they cannot mine more and faster than the rest of the miners, thus equalizing every miner contribution. So again, this is to make sure that big banks and other people can't monopolize it. Although mining has kind of been monopolized, there is still some, I guess, governing factors that could make sure it doesn't get too crazy. Next, we're wrapping up here almost. What do you call a wallet that requires 2 or more keys to send a transaction? Now, this one might seem easy, but it's a little tricky. A multi-sig. It's called a multi-sig wallet, as in multi-signature, because 2 or more private keys are required to create the necessary signatures to send a transaction. So, a wallet like this is going to be more safer, and it's kind of like two-factor authentication for your Bitcoin wallet. So, think about that too with you guys. Safety and managing it and understanding all these questions is supposed to help you be able to navigate the cryptocurrency waters safely and understand what the fuck you're actually holding. So what is a public key? It is the public key mathematically corresponds to a Bitcoin address. A Bitcoin address mathematically corresponds to a public key and looks like this. You guys have probably seen this before. Again, because it's public, you could give it to anyone willing to send you funds. By giving away your public key address, you're not risking exposing your private key, which is required to sign on outgoing transactions. So again, if anyone asks you for a key to send you money, don't ever give your private key, even though that's like a file. There is a key like this to it, but your public key, it is safe to give out. I don't really like giving out my public key, or I'll generate other ones. What I do, I have other wallets that if I'm ever receiving funds, I have another wallet. I give that public key out. I receive money there, and then I send it to another wallet of mine that I actually use, and then I take it offline. Last one. We got 3 questions left. How many addresses does a wallet have? 1,000, very large. 10, 1,000, no. A very large number. Wallets can generate addresses from your private key on demand for each new transaction, and the number of new addresses is infinite. So you could generate as many addresses to your wallet for different purposes. Don't fret over how many you have, but keep it under control so you don't confuse yourself. Last 2. How to set the right transaction fee. What do you do? Simple. Most wallets track current rate of transaction fees and give you an estimate and options depending on how fast you want the transactions to be confirmed. Most wallets indeed allow to set custom transaction fees and even tell you how soon they estimate your transaction will be included into the block based on the fee you chose and also on current average transaction fees across the network. This is one thing to note, but it could get confusing because you are getting charged a set transaction fee by brokers like Coinbase and Binance. It is different than the actual transaction fee being charged on average if you were just sending it through your wallet and pushing things through the network. Again, that is the power of Bitcoin. You could use the network without being one of these exchanges and start sending and receiving money as such. Last one, what does a Bitcoin string look like? You guys have already seen examples. It's easy to think it's this one. It might seem like this one, but it's this one, you know. You could have confused the Bitcoin ID with a Betch32 SegWit address, this one, and SegWit addresses always start with BC. So again, it's hard to tell. I've kind of got familiar with it. I think the amount of characters is what separates these two, but that's pretty much it. We'll see our results. I messed up, but we've completed our quiz. We missed that one. So hopefully that helps you guys. Hopefully you guys learned some cool fun facts and see Bitcoin is kind of confusing. It's not something to just jump in right away. You can, but now imagine how much you really don't know, and there's so much more to cover on this. This is just a fun quiz, give you guys information. So I encourage you. Hopefully this sparks a fire in you to look into it and get going with this so you could be ahead of the game, especially when Bitcoin over the years. You know, I'm a long-term investor. I'm thinking for the future. I'm thinking what could happen. You should too. And educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. So I love you guys. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe below, drop a like, drop a comment. Give me some stuff you want. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I love you all. Stay in school.